it is not the face of a liar. That in itself was enough for Abdullah bin Salam to switch from previous faith to present faith. And I have read about Hazrat Dahya Kalbi that when he used to walk in the streets, he used to do the niqab, so the sisters don't fall into evil. And then he says, كَأَنَّ الشَّمْسِ تَجْرِي فِي وَجْهِهِ. It is like the sun is rotating in his face. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يطع الله والرسول فأولئك مع الذين أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين وحسن أولئك رفيقا. صدق الله العظيم. My beautiful family, brothers and sisters and beautiful children, a recap of what we studied last week. In essence, we made mention that this heart is the king. But every king has an advisory board. And the top advisor to the heart is the mind. That's why the Nabi of Allah said, Al-aqlu ra'su mali. Al-aqlu ra'su mali. That my intellect, the ability to reason, is my capital. So when a person has goods, there's a capital that he has. We call it Ra'sul Mal. So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that my capital is my aql. And this is the wazir, the advisor to the heart. So if the heart is on one page and the aql is not on that page, there's going to be a problem. So the aql and the heart both have to be on the same page for a person to progress. Now, all Muslims throughout the entire world, when it comes to loving Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by faith are on the same page. By faith, they're on the same page. Everyone in the Muslim world loves Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we see a demonstration of that, right or wrong, when there are people in the world that say things that are hurtful about the Nabi of Allah. There will be protests. There will be people that will lose their cool. I saw a very strong representation of that early in the late 1900s, 1997, 98. There was a brother from Bosnia. His name was Asim, or his name is Asim, he's still alive. He took me to the hospital. He said, my uncle is sick. Mount Olivet Hospital. So he said, my uncle is sick. And patients that go to that hospital, basically they don't return back home. From there they go to the Qabristan, to the graveyard. So he said, my uncle is very sick, let's go and visit him. So we went to visit him. And I saw this elderly person on a bed, of course. There were a few drinks, drinks on the side. And the doctor said that he's only got a few days. So I said to him, read the kalima. So Brother Asim translated, and he said that Imam is saying, read the kalima, and he nodded like this. He said, no. I was shocked. Why is he saying no? So I thought that he is saying no, that he does not know the kalima in Arabic. So I said to Brother Asim, tell him to recite it in any language, in his own language, but you become a witness to it. Anyway, I found him that he was licking his lips like this. So he was very thirsty. So there was apple juice. I picked up the apple juice and I gave it to him. And he drank the apple juice. And then it was time. So I said to Brother Asim, let's leave. We'll meet him tomorrow. So when we were leaving, Brother Asim said, that was not apple juice. That was alcohol. I was shocked. He's a Muslim brother. And I gave him alcohol to drink, thinking it was apple juice. So Brother Asim says that my uncle is alcoholic. My uncle is alcoholic. I was trying to gather my thoughts, what to say. And after a few days, his janazah came here. This person's janazah came here to Holland Park Mosque. And in the early days, it was Holland Park that used to take care of all the janazahs. I used to wash all the bodies. So, wash the body downstairs. Brother Asim is there. And I said, what's the story of this person? And when I was washing, I saw a big cut here, a big cut, like somebody with a dagger, like a cut. So I said, what is this? So he said that in Bosnia, he went to the pub, he used to drink, and a few Serbs, they started to say things about the Prophet of Allah. So he went out and he fought against all three. And they stabbed him. So I said that inshallah, he took the dagger for the love of the Prophet of Allah. Inshallah, that will come to his rescue. Inshallah. So we can find that a person may be in a very dismal situation spiritually. But when it comes to the love of the Nabi of Allah, people behave in a very different manner that is not understood, cannot be comprehended by the critics and by the West and by those people that are outside the fold of Islam. But what we are trying to do, what we are trying to establish is that the heart loves the Nabi of Allah through faith. But we need to satisfy the wazir, the advisor. So the advisor and the heart are on the same page when it comes to the love of the Nabi of Allah. Because we find that many people, they start to criticize the religion. They start to criticize the Prophet of Allah on certain things. It means that their mind is not on the same page of the heart. So we made mention that there are three things that basically allows the mind to be satisfied. And once the mind is satisfied, it bows in front of that person. And we made mention, and Sister Debbie said that please translate the Arabic words. So I will translate the Arabic words. There are three things that we need to be mindful of. If we can establish three things in the Prophet of Allah, rationally, logically, mantiqly, they call it mantiq, our mind will bow in front of the Prophet of Allah and we will love him by the mind, by the intellect. And they are the three things: Kamal, Jamaal and Ihsan. Kamal, Jamaal, Ihsan. Kamal means perfection. Jamaal means beauty. And Ihsan means kindness, favor. To a certain level, the whole Sirat is about the Kamal and the Jamaal and the Ihsan of Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's what it's all about. So we spoke about Kamal last week. That if you find a person in the community, in your family structure, that is truthful, that is generous, that has modesty, that is just, automatically you will fall in love with that person. How many people we have in our family structure, in our community, that are kind, that are forgiving, that are just, that are truthful, and you find no reason intellectually to not like them. You'll start loving that person. So that's why the entire seerah of the Nabi of Allah speaks about him as a person, as a human being. So we spoke about that last week. I would like to complete the topic of Kamal in a nutshell with this last story. We made mention of a few stories last week. One of the greatest enemies of Islam in the time of the Nabi of Allah was Abu al-Hakam, Abu Jahl, Amr bin Hisham. He was one of the greatest enemies. One day, he and Akhnas bin Shuraik, they were sitting together. And Akhnas bin Shuraik and many people like him felt that sometimes in animosity, Abu Jahl, he goes too far. And they used to say to him that, look, if Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is right, what would you do on the other side? They used to say this to Abu Jahl. They used to say this to Abu Lahab. What would you do on the other side? Anyway, one day Akhnas bin Shuraik and Abu Jahl were sitting together, and Akhnas bin Shuraik said to Abu Jahl, do you really think from the bottom of your heart, that Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a liar? He's an imposter. And Abu Jahl looked around because he wanted to be, satisfied that there's no one listening to this discussion. Once he was satisfied that there was no one there except Akhnas bin Shuraik, he said to Akhnas bin Shuraik that, look, the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad, is not lying. He has never lied before. He is a prophet. But if we accept him as a prophet, our tribe, the Makhzum tribe, cannot compete with him. We cannot compete with Banu Hashim. That was the reason why he did not come into Islam. So what we learn from this is, and this is amazing, that sometimes the mind is saying something, but because of some internal deficiency, may it be ego, may it be another internal deficiency, a person does not listen to the wazir, does not listen to the advisor, and he stays in the bubble of darkness. So that's why the dua ihdina sirat al-mustaqim is very important, that we recite multiple times daily, because guidance, even if this is satisfied, sometimes a person does not come into the fold of Islam like Abu Talib. So that's why we make the dua of hidayah all the time. So this is the kamal of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was the second thing? Perfection. What is the second thing that allows a person to fall in love with somebody? It is the external beauty. So you can say kamal is the internal beauty and Jamaal is the external beauty. Many, many stories in human history speak about the ishq, the love, the intense, violent love of one person for another. We have many stories like this in our cultures in the subcontinent. Romeo and Juliet, with all these love stories that we hear about. The violent, intense love of Zulaykha for Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam. We hear about that in Surah number 12. That she became blinded. She became blinded because it was the external beauty that extracted or attracted the attention of Zulaykha. She could not hold herself. Despite her status in the community, she could not hold herself back. She fell into a crime. This is the external beauty. Now let's try to understand the external beauty of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're not talking about the internal now. We're talking about the external. I was surprised after studying the ahadith or the narrators that narrated the external of the Nabi of Allah. There's only 17 or 18 Sahaba. 17 or 18 Sahaba from so many became the transmitters of the beauty of the Nabi of Allah. Only 17, 18. Weren't the others looking at the Prophet of Allah? Why didn't they relate and transmit the beauty of the Nabi of Allah? They said there was a reason behind it. The beauty of the Nabi of Allah used to grow on you. What does that mean? That first time when you look at the Prophet of Allah, you may be in the position to look at him. But the more you look at him, the more your eye drops. You're not allowed to see him. The awe and the reverence of the Nabi of Allah did not allow a person to really stare at him. So you may, first time, all right, that's fine. Second time, it's the opposite of the Kaaba. The Kaaba, you see the first time, you're blown away. That is the beauty of Yusuf. That's the beauty of Yusuf. You look at Yusuf the first time, whoa, ma hada bashara. In hada illa malakun kareem. He's not a human being, he's an angel. But what happened after that? Zulaykha could control herself around Yusuf. Initially she couldn't, but once she was in the same room and this and that and she was looking at him, she got a control over herself. But the Nabi of Allah was very different. His beauty was from bottom to top. Once you looked at him, fine. Second time you look at him, your eagerness to look at him increases. The beauty and the Jamaal increases. And this is a description of Jannah. Remember that. This is a description of Jannah. Jannah, when you go the first time, ooh, yes, beautiful. But each time you look at Jannah and the bounties of Jannah, the beauty increases. Each time it increases. If it becomes stagnant, it is not truly a masterpiece created by Allah Almighty for the noble. It has to increase in its beauty. So Nabi Kareem Muhammad's beauty was amazing. The Jamaal was amazing. And not only the Jamaal, the fragrance that used to emit from the body of the Nabi of Allah was amazing as well. Sahaba used to say that sometimes through the smell, we knew that the Prophet of Allah just passed the street. And he never used external atar. This was the smell of his body. This was the smell of his sweat. This was the smell of the skin of the Nabi of Allah. There's a great scholar, Imam Asim, rahimahullah, one of the Qurra of the Quran. He used to love reading the Quran. And he used to read the Quran day and night. One day the Nabi of Allah came in the dream of Imam Asim. And he said, "Oh Asim, you read the Quran so beautiful. Come forward." And the Prophet of Allah kissed him on the lips. Because he reads the Quran with this. You know that there are angels here when a person reads the Quran? When the words come out, the angels grab it. Because this is the kalam of Allah Almighty. So, kissed Imam Asim. The Nabi of Allah kissed him once up here. Now what happened is he wakes up. He's in reality now. He's in real life. And there's a permanent, beautiful smell that emits from his mouth. One kiss of the Nabi of Allah in a dream. And there's a permanent smell that is emitting from his mouth. People recognize that there's a different fragrance around him. So he wants to keep it as a secret. But then he reveals that the Nabi of Allah came in the dream and he kissed my mouth. And this is the result of that. So this is the Jamaal of the Nabi of Allah. Now, let's listen to a few statements of Sahaba regarding the beauty of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I am giving Jumas on a hadith, and I call it the first khutbah of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Madinatul Munawwara. And we've been speaking about it for the last 4 weeks. And there'll be another few weeks that we will speak about this one statement and one khutbah of the Nabi of Allah. And who is the Rawi, the narrator of this hadith? Abdullah bin Salam. You remember? So Abdullah bin Salam, the rabbi who accepted Islam. So he says that فَلَمَّا اسْتَبَنْتُ وَجْهَهُ, when I put my eyes on the face of the Nabi of Allah, the first time. So Nabi Kareem Muhammad arrives. We are awaiting the arrival of Muhammad. So he arrives in Madinatul Munawwara. I place my eyes on his face. Araftu. I recognized. Araftu is knowing with conviction. Knowing with conviction. Araftu anna wajhahu. That indeed the face of this person, laysa biwajhin kadhab. It is not the face of a liar. That in itself was enough for Abdullah bin Salam to switch from previous faith to present faith, to current faith. From Yahudiyat to Islam. He left Judaism and he came into Islam just because he saw the face of the Nabi of Allah. How amazing is that? What beauty is that? What beauty is that? Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala, and he became a Muslim very late. He became a Muslim very late. He only found the Nabi of Allah for 2.5 years. So right at the end, Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala became a Muslim. So he had a few days, few nights, you can say, from each month to sit with the Nabi of Allah. So his statement is, مَا رَأَيْتُ شَيْئًا, I have never seen anything, ahsan, more beautiful, hasan, ahsan, more beautiful, min Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And remember, in Makkah, in Medina, in the Arab Peninsula, there were very, very handsome people. There were very, very handsome people. Hazrat Dahya Kalbi was a very handsome person. And I have read about Hazrat Dahya Kalbi that when he used to walk in the streets, he used to do the niqab. So the sisters don't fall into evil. He used to make niqab. because the sisters used to fall into evil. They look at him. Oh. So he has to cover himself. So Hazrat Abu Hurairah is looking at that as well. But when he sees the Nabi of Allah, he says, I have not seen ahsan, more beautiful, min Rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he says, كَأَنَّ الشَّمْسِ تَجْرِي فِي وَجْهِهِ. It is like the sun is rotating in his face. So there's a glow. There's a noor. There's a glow, like a sun in the face. This is the expression in Arabic to express the highest level of Jamaal and beauty. But one of the most famous statements that has been encapsulated in poetry is of Hazrat Hassan bin Sabit. What he said was amazing. Hazrat Hassan bin Sabit was the official poet of the Nabi of Allah. Because people used to ridicule the Nabi of Allah through poetry. Now the Prophet of Allah, وَمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ الشِّعْرِ. The Prophet of Allah was not a poet. But the rebuttal has to be through poetry. So the official poet of the Nabi of Allah that used to speak on behalf of the Nabi of Allah used to be Hazrat Hassan bin Sabit. And the Prophet of Allah made dua for him that Allah Rabbul Izzat allow Jibreel to assist you. وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. That Jibreel come and he assist you when you are coming up with poetry to defend my honor and my right. And you know what Hazrat Hassan bin Sabit said? And I think this encapsulates the beauty of the Nabi of Allah. He says, وَأَحْسَنُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَكَتُّ عَيْنِي وَأَحْسَنُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَكَتُّ عَيْنِي وَأَجْمَلُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَلِدِ النِّسَاء خُلِقْتَ مُبَرَّأً مِنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ كَأَنَّكَ قَدْ خُلِقْتَ كَمَا تَشَاءُ. You can't say better than that. You cannot say better than that. وَأَحْسَنُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَكَتُّ عَيْنِي. He said, no eye has seen anyone more handsome, more beautiful. No eye. وَأَحْسَنُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَكَتُّ عَيْنِي. No eye has seen anyone more handsome and more beautiful than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَأَجْمَلُ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَلِدِ النِّسَاء. And no lady has given birth to a person that is more beautiful than the Nabi of Allah. No mother has given birth to a person that is more beautiful than Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. خُلِقْتَ مُبَرَّأً مِنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ. It is like he has been created without any blemish, without any default. He is perfect. If you can say that if there's a perfect person in terms of external beauty, equally internal beauty, it is Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. كَأَنَّكَ قَدْ خُلِقْتَ كَمَا تَشَاءُ. It seems like he was dictating and saying, Allah, I want to be like this. I want a nose like this. I want eyes like this. I want ears like this. I want shoulders like this. I want hips like this. I want a stomach like this. I want knees like this. I want feet like this. I want toes like this. I want fingers like this. It's like he was dictating and Allah was creating. He was dictating. He told Allah Almighty, it seems like that I want to be like this, create me like this. خُلِقْتَ كَأَنَّكَ قَدْ خُلِقْتَ كَمَا تَشَاءُ. What a beautiful statement by Hazrat Hassan bin Sabit radiyallahu ta'ala an, to give us an insight to the beauty of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So if he's so beautiful and people have fallen for beauty that diminishes over time. How many handsome men, my sisters, are handsome today, but after 10, 15 years, they lose that. And how many sisters, my brothers, are very pretty today, but they lose it after 10, 15 years. But the Nabi of Allah's beauty was permanent. It increased daily. Those that were spectators, those that were the audience of the Nabi of Allah, known as the Sahaba, they could see and feel there was an increase in that beauty. Do you want to, my beautiful brothers and sisters, and those that are watching online, do you want to be in the presence of such a person? Now we can't in this world because his time is before us. But there's an opportunity for us to be with him if we make the right choices right now. And it all comes when the mind and the heart are both on the same page of respecting the Nabi of Allah and loving the Nabi of Allah. But that love has to be of a certain kind. I'm going to mention 2 verses, very, very important. These are all introductions. We're going to, maybe after 1 or 2 weeks, start the lineage and the family tree of the Nabi of Allah. But this is a prem talk. It's built in us. So we are ready for the seerat of the Nabi of Allah. I would like you to remember 2 verses. A relationship is a highway. It's a highway from both sides. You can't clap with one hand. So if a boy says to a girl, I love you, and the girl says, I don't love you, it's not going to work. And if the girl says to the boy, I love you, and the boy says, I don't love you, it doesn't work. The example is you can't clap with one hand. I said about 20 years ago, there was a group here of non-Muslims, grade 11 and 12. And I gave this example, and I said that we need to love, if God loves us, we need to love him back, because we need to reciprocate. And a relationship is 2 sides, and you can't clap with one hand. And one person stood up and he said, I can. And he did. He was a weirdo. So he started doing this, and this used to hit this, and he used to clap. So he caught me off guard. Yeah, so we have to be very, very careful with our statements. But normally, let me say, normally you need 2 hands. So there's a relationship that the Prophet of Allah has with us. We're going to try to understand that from the Quran. But there's a relationship that is demanded that we need to have with the Prophet of Allah. It's a 2-way highway. Can't be one way. Can't be slapping with one hand. So the Prophet of Allah loves us, but we need to love him as well. And both verses are in the Quran. I'm going to read both verses. So the first verse we recited last week. And when you go back home, study that verse. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. And this is Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9. Which verse was it? Can anyone tell me? Second last. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ 128. 129 is the last verse, 128. And the translation, but Jazakumullah, you were very, very close. So Allah Almighty says the Prophet of Allah is allowing us to see the inside of the Nabi of Allah. We only are speaking about the outside, but Allah Almighty is giving us a glimpse to the inside of the Nabi of Allah. What emotions he had for us, for the people, for his ummah. And it's very, very clear. Allah Almighty says that verily there has come unto you a messenger. We spoke about this last week. From amongst yourselves, it grieves him that you should receive any injury. Meaning when we are crying, he's crying. He's not happy. When we are in grief, he's in grief. This is the relationship that the Nabi of Allah has with us. And he is anxious to Allah. And he is anxious over you to Allah. That he's always anxious. He wants the best for us. This is the insight to the feeling that the Prophet of Allah holds for every single person, for all of us. For those that were with him and for those that came after him. He is always in that state that when we cry, he cries. When we are happy, he is happy. But if he has such a relationship with us, then there should be something that we should be doing as well. True? So then Allah Almighty speaks about that relationship. Now listen to this. This is for all of us. Now this is in Surah Tawbah. Surah Tawbah is Surah number 9. And it is verse number 24. Verse number 24. This is what Allah demands from us. So he's told us what is the feeling of the Prophet of Allah from inside towards us. Now Allah Almighty is saying, all right, if the Prophet of Allah loves you so much, then there is something that you need to do. قُلْ إِنْ كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ وَأَبْنَاؤُكُمْ وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم وأموال اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله فتربصوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. Translation. Say if your fathers your sons, your brothers, your wives, your relatives, the wealth that you have gained, the businesses, the commerce in which you fear a decline, factories, masna', factories, and the dwellings in which you delight, in which you find delight, are dearer to you than Allah and His Messenger. Meaning that all these relationships that have been made mention, mum, dad, brother, sister, mate, pal, buddy, all these relationships, resources, masna', factories, everything put on one side, the love of Allah and the Rasul should be greater. Your feeling towards Allah and the Rasul should be greater. If the Nabi of Allah has these sentiments, positive sentiments towards us, then we need to reciprocate. And that is going to come when we truly love Him. I'm going to make mention of I believe this is not for us, but for education. There was a teacher and a student. There was a teacher and there was a student, and they were traveling together. So now it was time to station. It was time to station. So the teacher says to the student, go and bring firewood. Go and bring firewood. We need to cook. So the student says, I'm too tired. I'm too tired. You know, we've had a long walk, a long day. I've got cramps in my body and I can't do it. So you go. So now the teacher is going. He brings the firewood. And he brings the firewood, he throws it onto the ground, and he says to the student who claims to love him, because he's the student, he says to the student, all right, why don't you make the dough? Why don't you make the dough now? He says, Ustadji, my beautiful Ustad, teacher, your hands are very blessed. If you make the dough, there will be more barakat in the roti, in the khubz. My hands are sinful. My hands are sinful. So he makes the teacher make the dough. So the teacher is making the dough. Now he makes the dough. And now he says to the student, all right, now you cook the food. He said, how can I cook the food? You made the dough, all the blessing. Now if I stir the pot, no blessing in it, you stir it. You make the curry, the gravy. So now the Ustad is making the curry. Now courtesy, he says, all right, after cooking, he says, all right, let's sit down, let's eat now. So the student says, now I feel very shy to say no, I'll sit down with you, and he eats. This kind of love is not the love that is demanded in Islam. This is not the love. If we truly love the Nabi of Allah, there is a demand. There is a proof in the practices of a human being. Not that when everything is hard, we say that, Ustadji, you do it. The Imam does it. The community members do it. I am exonerated, I am free. But when it comes to eating the cake, I'm ready to eat the cake. This used to be the behavior of the munafiqun. When it came to the distribution of the mali ghanimat, they were first in line, the booty. But when it came to fighting in the battlefield, they were right at the end. They were right at the end. They were hiding. They were trying to find that corner where they cannot be spotted. But when it came to the mali ghanimat, they were first in line. But we don't want to be the people that claim to love the Nabi of Allah like the student claimed to love the Ustad. But when it came for sacrifice, he goes into the back. And when it comes to enjoying the perks and the benefits, he's right in the front. So the muhabbat that is demanded, that we need to love the Nabi of Allah, is a muhabbat that is proven through our actions. It is proven through our actions. A recap of what we studied. A recap. 3 things that allow a person to love another person. Number 1, Kamal, perfection. Number 2, Jamaal, beauty. And number 3, ihsan, that we have not touched yet. So Kamal is perfection. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ his behavior, his external, the way he used to carry himself, the way he used to behave with people, his akhlaqiyat were perfect. That are a beacon of light for humanity till the day of judgment. We spoke about that. The second is the beauty, the external beauty of the Nabi of Allah. That in itself brought people into the fold of Islam. Like we made mention, Abdullah bin Salam radiyallahu ta'ala accepted Islam by just seeing the beautiful face of the Nabi of Allah. And what did Hazrat Abu Hurairah say? كَأَنَّ الشَّمْسَ تَجْرِي فِي وَجْهِهِ. That the face of the Nabi of Allah was like a sun making tawaf, rotating in his face. It was like glowing. And I made mention only 17 or 18 transmitters transmit the external of the Nabi of Allah, because most of them were looking down out of respect. And then we made mention of the very famous statement of Hazrat Hassan bin Sabit, that he basically said that there's no one that is more handsome, more beautiful than Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. No mother has given birth to a person that is more beautiful than the Nabi of Allah, so on and so forth. But all this, Kamal and Jamaal, perfection and beauty, should allow us by faith and by reason to fall in love with Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But if we have fallen in love with Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then the demand is of verse number 24 of Surah Tawbah. Surah number 9, verse number 24. That we are ready to give up everything, but we're not ready to sacrifice the legacy of the Nabi of Allah. We are ready to sacrifice our factories, our loved ones, our time, our resources, but we're not ready to give up any one part of the beautiful, rich legacy of Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is the demand. And we made mention of verse 128 of Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9. Allah Almighty allows us to see the inside of the Nabi of Allah, how much feeling he had towards us. So it is befitting, rationally, logically, ba'itibari aql, that we fall in love with him. Inshallah. All right, next week, inshallah, we will speak about the ihsan of the Nabi of Allah, the kindness of the Nabi of Allah. And then the week after that, we're going to speak about the protection of his words. And then inshallah, we will start the family tree of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.